Mendel. Jewish history has celebrated the leadership of two Moses figures. Moses, the liberator from Egypt, and Moses Maimonides. Mimoshe ad Moshe lo kam ke Moshe. Jewish intuition always saw both figures together. In some way, Jewish history believed that only in an integration between both figures will we be able to gain a larger and clearer perspective of the future of Judaism and the Jewish people in history. The Moses of Egypt brought his people into a covenant relationship with God. He enabled his people to share in God's prayer. He mediated for them God's deepest dream, that this people shall become a holy people in history. Atem tiyu li mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. He was the leader who tried to encourage his people to leave the security of slavery, to live with the uncertainty of an imageless God, to accept the challenge of declaring war against paganism. Moses mastered the paganism of Egypt and understood in Torah how to wean his people away from idolatry. He brought his people through a desert, taught them to live with difficulty and uncertainty, and prepared them to become a free nation in history. 2,000 years later, a different Moses surfaced. Moses of Cordova, Moses the paradigm of the Sephardic heritage. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our teacher, who combined in one life the mastery of the sciences of his age, the medicine and logic and philosophy of Islamic civilization as it mediated Plato and Aristotle, mastered every aspect of Talmudic law, Bavli, Yerushalmi, Tosefta, Mechilta. There was no area of Jewish knowledge that he was not totally familiar with. To live with Maimonides and to study his works is to feel always guilty. You ask, was it possible for one human being to have been able to integrate this enormous range of knowledge? Now you would say, well, Moses, Maimonides, maybe he had an Oxford fellowship. Maybe in some way he lived in this very secluded areas of Cordova with a grant from the Ford Foundation and was able to have 5 secretaries, 17 tape recorders, and in a sense being able therefore to continue in that form. Moses Maimonides was not an official rabbi, he was a doctor. He was opposed to making a living from Torah. He lived a life of persecution. Many say that in Morocco he had to live as a Marrano when he ran away from the Almohad persecution. Maimonides was a political statesman who carried the burdens of his whole people. He answered responsa, hundreds of responsa from all over the world. His scholarship was not an ivory tower scholarship, but a scholarship that was rooted in commitment and concern for every Jew. Read his epistle to the Jews of Yemen. Read the way he responds to a people in suffering. Read the might of this great intellectual who gave us the Mishnah Torah, the guide of the perplexed, and the compassion and love of a caring leader. This Moses Sephardic genius shaped the last 800 years of Jewish history. I live with him daily, and I could testify that if not for Maimonides, my own commitment to Judaism would have been weakened. My ability to sustain commitment in the midst of my own philosophical search grew from the fact that Maimonides accompanied me throughout my life. What was his challenge and what was his contribution? Briefly, Maimonides represents a moment in Jewish history when the Jewish people were traumatized by exile. Maimonides is born in 1135, grows up in Andalusia, Spain, which is not the Eastern European ghetto, in which many Jewish youth were attracted to Andalusian civilization, to Spanish poetry, to Aristotle, and to the larger world around them. They participated in public life. They did not live a ghettoized mentality. The Jews he lived with were part of world culture. Also, he faced a frightened and oppressed Jewish community. Religious fanaticism was rampant in the Almohad persecution. The issue that Jews had to face is, how do you survive as a minority in a world rich with culture? Why bother? Why carry the badge of suffering and pain? Why live as an oppressed minority when there's such rich music, culture, and art in the world? Why suffer as an alien, persecuted minority? Why continue, and how best to continue? The leaders of France, the Ashkenazic community, the Balei Tosfot, those who lived in Germany, who were influenced by the Christian West, their solution was build inward. Build a wall of halakha and Jewish custom and Jewish practice that will protect our youth from the dangerous visions of an alien wisdom and an alien culture. Keep Aristotle out, because if he gets in, Rabbi Akiva gets thrown out. And we're going to have to choose between Plato and Aristotle or our Jewish tradition, and therefore build academies of learning which will prevent the sciences and culture of the world to penetrate the hearts of our youth. Protect them from alien wisdom. And furthermore, what have we to learn from the Goyim who persecute us and bruise our bodies? Our bodies testify that there's nothing in their teachings for us to respect and to emulate. And therefore, the vision, the approach to survival was build a tunnel vision, build a way which would develop an inner strength and integrity that will inspire the heroism, and you read it in the Magzah, of Ashkenazic women dying with their children, refusing to give up a kechuta sara of halacha and mitzvah, willing to sacrifice everything. The capacity for martyrdom of Ashkenazic Jewry was amazing. And this great martyrdom was a testimony that the spirit of this people will survive only if it ghettoizes its own internal passion. To develop intensity, to develop passion, to develop commitment, to develop a person who dreams Torah day and night. As the Yiddish song goes, was is the beste Schora, as Yankele soll lernen Torah. My mother lived in poverty, but made sure that her children should study Torah. That devotion, that there's nothing more important than being a Shomer Shabbos, that intensity can only come if you say no to the great attractions of the world. You have a choice. You want to survive as a minority, then build an internal world in which you would say, as the Talmud says, Ein lahakadosh baruch hu ba'olamo ela daled amot shel halacha bilvad. God only has in his world only the 4 cubits of halacha. The world has to become the page of Talmud. Hafoch ba, the kulabach, turning it, all is in it. There's nothing that you need outside of your own culture. It is this challenge that Maimonides in the Sephardic heritage said with an absolute clarion, pristine integrity. No, this is not the way for Jewish survival. And let me read the 3 different groups who fought with Maimonides. The issues that he had to deal with. And the major issue was, how do you interpret this tradition? Do you interpret literally? Do you express total loyalty to it, unconditional? Whatever it says, you say amen to? Or do you say, wait, this tradition has to enter into dialogue with science and Western thought. We have to be able to see an alternative vision. How do you read the tradition will decide the future of Jewish history. The future will be won by those who know how to unlock the interpretive boldness of the past. If the past is literal, if the past is only understood in a fundamentalistic fashion, then that is the way our future will be. Jewish history moves forward only if it reinterprets its past. You cannot go forward unless you rechange and restructure the way you heard the voice of Moses. In Jerusalem, we go forward and backward at the same time. You never know where you're living when you walk the streets in Jerusalem. The shovels dig down deep, and Teddy calls me, and he's trying to build a new road because he wants to solve a problem for tomorrow, and they dig down and they discover a pot. Some broken pot, who knows where. And Teddy calls me, Gewalt geschrien, I want to save lives, and in discovering pots. And suddenly the road stops, construction stops for months, and you'll see if you walk in Jerusalem by the old city, you're going this way and that way. It's not that we don't know how to build a straight road, but we don't know how to go straight because our past always comes up from under the ground and says, sorry kid, you can't go forward unless you look at me. You can't go forward. You can't go forward unless you bring all of Jewish history with you. What a burden and what a privilege. Now this sense of interpretation, Maimonides writes the following. There is a group of people, it's in chapter 10, Chelek, the 10th chapter of Sanhedrin. As my teacher Soloveitchik taught me, never trust your teacher, check the text at home. So I expect that the CJF will Xerox the 10th chapter of Chelek, and there will be a study session from 12 o'clock this evening. Now, things can happen. Now, they understand, he writes about this group, the teachings of the sages only in their literal sense, in spite of the fact that some of their teachings, when taken literally, seem so fantastic and irrational that if one were to repeat them literally, even the uneducated, let alone the sophisticated scholars, their amazement would prompt them to ask how anyone in the world could believe such things true, much less edifying. But there were people who were prepared to accept it. And then this is what Maimonides says about those who are absolutely loyal to every word of the Talmud and the Bible and understand it and accept it irregardless if it agrees or doesn't agree with human reason. Look what Maimonides, this is not Hartman talking, radical theologian. This is Moshe ben Maimon, who studied by Lubavitch, Shach, Mir Yeshiva, Slobodka, all over. This Sephardi has invaded every Ashkenazic home. And look what he says. The members of this group are poor in knowledge, even though they're very loyal. One can only regret their folly, their very effort to honor and to exalt the sages in accordance with their own meager understanding actually humiliates them. As God lives, this group destroys the glory of the Torah and extinguishes its light, for they make the Torah of God say the opposite of what it is intended. For God said in his perfect Torah, listen to Maimonides' text, it comes in the Guide of the Perplexed. This influenced all of his writings. This one sentence, Ki hi chachmatchem uvinatchem li'einei ha'amim. The nations of who hear of these statutes shall surely say, the nations, when they hear about the Torah, they shall surely say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. Rak am chacham v'navon hagoy hagadol hazeh. The nations will say, the Jewish people, Judaism, their Torah, is morally compelling, intellectually exciting, profound, worthy of being respected by all people. But Maimonides says, but this group interprets the laws and the teachings of our sages in such a way that when the other peoples of the world hear them, they say that this little people is foolish and ignoble. The issue, why do I need to share my Torah with those who beat my bodies? Why must my Torah, why must I make Moses and Aristotle speak to each other? Why must I bring Aristotle into the four corners of the Beit HaMidrash and ask Moses to speak in a way that Aristotle will say it makes sense? Why do I have to impress anti-Semites? Why do I have to impress people who have burnt my people? Why do I have to impress the world? Who cares about philosophy of the pagans? That could have been a very typical Jewish response. But Maimonides, and this is his greatness, never allowed our bruised bodies to poison the freedom of our minds. He never allowed suffering to be a justification for intellectual insulation and arrogance. The Jewish body is not part of the world, but the Jewish intellect must be. And Judaism must be capable of speaking in a language that humanity can understand. The ghetto was not meant to be the destiny of God's elect people. Jewish intensity, Jewish passion, Jewish commitment, Jewish seriousness does not require intellectual repression. Intellectual repression is not the price to build the Judaism that Maimonides wanted. He knew he was fighting a difficult battle, because many looked at these literalist, pious, passionate Jews and said, if that's what Judaism is, that's what it really is, that's the authentic Judaism. And since if that's what is authentic, then I don't want to have anything to do with it. That was the second group of readers. The third group of readers, Maimonides says, were the few who were prepared to build a new vision. The Sephardic heritage for Israel is to take Zionism, which sought to build intense Jewish identity in dialogue the world. Maimonides offers us a Judaism which is also not frightened of the world and tells the Jewish people, we are traumatized by the Holocaust. We've been traumatized by loneliness. But our great freedom is to bring Judaism and its message into an intellectual discourse with all of humanity. Thank you.
I would characterize the contemporary, when we speak of contemporary Jewish history, we often speak about what is possible today, because Jewish history seems to be moving in such rapid paces that the word contemporary loses its significance. But I would characterize both what I believe to be the rhythm in the country I live in Jerusalem and in Israel, and the community of the diaspora, are beginning to feel that something new is opening up, new possibilities, new thinking, new ways of making sense of what the future opens for us. In Israel, there was always this strange paradox. On one level, it is the expression of the greatest revolution in Jewish history. It is a revolution which moved from the definition of galut, exile, as a metaphysical necessity, as an ordained plan of God, irrespective of what theological position you would accept, either the famous mipnei chata'enu galinu me'artzenu, because of our sins were we exiled, or if you would accept the suffering remnant features, that Israel was meant to be in exile to bring humanity to a higher level of justice. And this is the way God, in some way, plants the seed of his elect people throughout the world. If you saw exile as a universal drama in which Jews were meant to bring the world to redemption, or it was to represent the suffering and guilt of a people who have not lived up to their covenant. But ultimately, exile was not a political fact, it was a theological statement about God's vision for history. And what characterized, interestingly, Jewish experience was, on one level, Jews were very active. Jews assumed personal responsibility for each other, for their neighbors. There was no society where there wasn't a malbish arumim, clothing the naked, bikur cholim societies, visiting the sick. There was always a sense that you have to do something to save an individual life. You never let a Jew die or feel abandoned. The sense of responsibility to help individual Jews characterized our whole medieval experience of Judaism and Jewish communal existence. But on one level, we sat back and realized that the transformation of our existence from political helplessness to sovereignty and self-determination was beyond the scope of human responsibility. We could pray for it, we can do mitzvot, we could perform commandments and hope that with this commandment we will unify God and his Shekhinah and the divine presence. We will plug into the mystery of exile. We will in some way energize the world to move towards a process of redemption. But this is not something we can be responsible for. This is not something we can change. This is bashert. I don't know if you grew up with that Yiddish expression. It's a bashert duvet. I heard this from my mother all the time. It's a bashert, also is es. Das ist unser Schicksal. Das ist unser Geurel. This is our destiny. This is what we were meant to carry. And the only thing we can do is carry that burden with silent dignity. And therefore, when Jews, and I was told the story, would be in Auschwitz or Buchenwald, and they would celebrate Passover, and they would end the Passover Seder with Ani Ma'amin b'Emunah Shlema b'Viat HaMashiach, va'afal pi sheyitmameya im kol zeh achake lo. I believe with a perfect faith with the coming of the Messiah. Next year in Jerusalem, and although he tarry, although it looks as if nothing in history suggests that there will be a change in Jewish history, b'chol zot ani ma'amin, I believe, I'm convinced that my destiny will change, and my task is to have the heroic dignity of suffering with the deepest faith that one day history will change. This was the dominant view of the way Jews understood their history and their faith. Zionism represents a radical break with that thinking. Israel is the creation of a people who demythologized their history, who said Torah is not in heaven, neither is our history in heaven. We are not pawns in God's Hegelian metaphysical drama of history. We are a free acting people, and we must assume responsibility not only for our personal life, but for our national existence. Many saw in this the greatest heretical movement in Jewish history. Many saw in this the rebellion against everything that was Jewish. Many saw in this the overthrowing of everything precious in Jewish religiosity. And therefore, till today, cannot give allegiance to the sovereign state of Israel, cannot sing the Hatikvah, the Jewish national anthem, cannot celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut, the Day of Independence, because to do that would be to rebel against the fundamental view of Jewish history that our national existence is not our responsibility, but God's vision for redemption. And dare we upset his scheme. But Zionism, secular Zionism, carried the day with the courage and boldness and suffering of young people in revolt. They created a national existence which reflected Jewish will, not Jewish faith. Jewish freedom rather than Jewish destiny. Jewish initiative rather than Jewish passivity. And this is why many Israelis earlier had difficulty dealing with the Holocaust. They couldn't understand Jews who passively went to their death. And there was a profound psychological, terrifying inability to say, those Jews were also my Jews. Those who walked silently, heroically, because this is Jewish destiny, are really part of my people. And the issue in the country, when I came, Im Yisraeli hu Yehudi or Min Chadash, is Israeli a new breed, a new person, or is he part of Jewish destiny and part of the Jewish people? And I recall, I'll never forget the day when Israelis discovered destiny. And that was after the Yom Kippur War. Suddenly, it was not only the tragic loss and the unpreparedness and the transition from the Six-Day War to our vulnerability in Yom Kippur. We managed to have even a greater victory than the Six-Day War. To come back with such vigor and strength was a testimony to our vitality and creative capacity to deal with all exigencies and all dangers. But there's something else that happened to Israelis. We won brilliant maneuvers in Egypt, and when Kissinger came and the term the peace process, and we are making progress, and we knew that the Soviet Union just rearmed Syria, and there's nothing we can do to change our fate. There's nothing that we can do that would bring about any change in our political status. At that moment, Israelis discovered the long destiny experience of Jewish history. Our range of possibilities the range of opportunity, the energizing of our will, does not seem to be the new Israeli. We discovered we were Jews who have to silently accept an inevitable process in history. Anachnu Yehudim, ze goralenu. So when I would walk in the streets, the only answer I would get, it's better than Auschwitz. It is not the same as the Second World War. It was not the ethos of this proud revolutionary who saw himself as a new breed in history. It is not that. It is not that. There's a dignity to the way we are dying. And I recall when I was advisor to the Minister of Education, Hammer, he told me that the Chief of Staff had called him to tell him that it is an important urgency, this was in the late 70s, that Israeli education inculcate in their high school students the reality of the book of Judges. There will never be peace in this land. It is a horrible educational error and a moral error, and Freud understood this as well, to bring our youth to great expectations and for them to live in disillusionment. To educate our youth with the feeling that peace is possible is a mistake. They must be taught that war is the permanent feature of our destiny. There may be 10, 15, or 20 years of quiet, but ultimately the situation of conflict is a permanent feature in the Middle East. What a tragic statement. We have come home to end homelessness. We have come home that the destiny of the Jew should not be the wanderer, and have chosen in its state to live in perpetual comfort. So what you had then in Israel, if you probe deeply into the psyche of this marvelous, strange, complex people, I've lived there for 20 years, and I feel like I'm in kindergarten. Really kindergarten in terms of the depth of the dialectical rhythms that make up this society. Indifference and yet such active concern both go together. Apathy and involvement. This is what we were about. Now, in Geneva, the Prime Minister went there with great integrity and made, I believe, one of his best statements. A statement which Israelis listened with great receptivity and without typical cynicism. Because usually Israelis are not turned on by rhetoric. There were tears, not in intellectuals, but in my grocery man. When I walked by on Emek Rephaim, he was listening. To my fruit man, Yechol hayot shehanechet sheli lo tiyeh b'milchama. Maybe there's a possibility that my grandchild's destiny will not be to have to serve in future wars. There was a feeling that maybe we were moving from destiny to choice. Once again, Israel was not to be the goral, the destiny, but Israel was to be the land of opportunity for innumerable changes. And the infusion of Russian Jews suddenly equally as well threw the country into a feeling of opportunity. Zionism has been reborn. Fatalism is over. Again, open possibilities for the future characterize our existence. Does that mean we are euphoric, dancing in the streets? No. But there is a change. There's a feeling something may happen. Those who argue for radical solutions of the Gandhi type do not resonate in our souls. They are the voices of desperation, despair, depression, grown from the fact that we believe we're caught in an inexorable destiny. But the better spirit of our people want change, innovation, and possibility. From destiny to choice may be now a new beginning. Maybe, I say this with great caution, but we have broken the demonization of each other. We have broken the allergies we had to each other. We shook hands and the world didn't collapse. And everyone looked at Rubinstein as he shook the Palestinians' hands, and everyone wondered, was geht, Mashiach is gekommen mit gesucht Shalom Aleichem. The Messiah came, what happened? We'll love each other? No, we're not in a love-in. And Geneva wasn't a love-in. And the negotiations are not going to be love-ins. But the demonization ended and possibility begins. I believe that this spirit equally as well characterizes Jewish existence in the diaspora. I believe that there is a profound sense that the relationship of the Jewish people to Israel and to its own future is equally moving from destiny to choice. There was a feeling that we were caught up in our connection to Israel by the great events of the Six-Day War. The Six-Day War brought us into connection with Israel, not out of choice, but out of destiny. We knew that if Israel would fall, there would be no future to Jewish history. People came out of the walls against their will. When I was a professor at McGill, people who I would never identify as Jewish suddenly came to me and says, is there anything I can do? They were caught by the great events, moved them irrespective of their wills. There was a feeling of necessity that moved our connection to the state of Israel. Equally as well, we thought that being Jewish, as Isaiah Berlin himself says, is an inexorable fact. It's like tables and chairs. You can't run away from your Jewish existence. Hitler taught us that assimilation is impossible. There is a necessity that you cannot run away from. And therefore, you might as well join, you might as well be part of this, or in some way recognize that anti-Semitism will never leave, and therefore your Jewish identity can never be removed. There was a certain sense of security in this perverse idea of Jean-Paul Sartre, that the definition of the Jew comes from external anti-Semitism. You can't run away. The Goyim won't let us. As I remember when I was a rabbi, and the mother was trying to explain to her son why he shouldn't intermarry. Sie wird rufen, a schwarze Goy, a schwarze Yid. She'll call you a dirty Jew. You think love is going to carry that? You can't run away. The hatred is metaphysical. It's 2,000 years. So in some way, we were reassured of our continuity because of the inevitable necessity of anti-Semitism awakening us to our Jewish identity. Nebuch, it's perverse, but there's a certain type of security in thank God I'm going to be hated, so at least I have a place and a continuity. As Sadat said, and people said, try to love Israelis and you'll destroy them. Declare war against them and you unite them. A people of adversity, a people that thrive on this. In a sense, I think American Jewry now are aware that anti-Semitism and necessity cannot be the basis of building Jewish continuity. The memory of the Holocaust cannot be the organizing principle. And anti-Semitism and the fear of rejection of the world cannot produce and perpetuate our grandchildren. And that's clear. America will testify that assimilation is possible. And assimilation does not mean embracing another religion. Assimilation does not mean, in my definition, abandoning a survey that would come and say, are you Jewish? Assimilation, in my definition, is when a Jew, when asked, why didn't you visit Jerusalem? Or why didn't you go to the GA, lahavdil? Why didn't you go? Would answer, why don't you ask me, why wasn't I in Paris? Why don't you ask me, why wasn't I in Frankfurt or in Bengal or visiting the Tibetan Lama? When I don't have to feel guilty for not visiting Jerusalem is when Jews assimilate. When I don't have to offer and believe that you have a priority claim upon me. When I do not believe that in some way I have to give an answer why I don't go to shul or why I'm not involved in the community. When I feel that your claim and your question has no validity. When I do not allow myself to be an object of your criticism. When I feel that your language has no right to demand of me that I explain why I don't give to UJA. When that stops, that's when Jews assimilate. When Jews do not have to apologize. When they're not ashamed. When they stop being ashamed for their indifference is when assimilation begins. America is the land of the possibility of assimilation. And therefore, the issue of how do we build community? How do we now move, both in Israel and here? This was my introduction. I hope you'll invite me next year for the second part. No, I didn't mean it in that. Okay, now, as I said last night, we must reject fundamental literalism. Now, it is meant metaphorically and symbolically. Now, what directions can I give? And I racked my head out speaking with Bobby, and I said, you know, what do I say? And I used to know. Amazing. I want to share with you the interest. I don't know if you've had that experience. The older I get, the stupider I become. I was so certain. I mean, if you would have invited me 12, 15 years ago, I would have been able to tell you, well, you do A, B, C, D. Continuity is guaranteed. Call me next year. And in a sense, I speak from a real sense of uncertainty. But this is the only thing I have. As a philosopher, I'm hungry for wisdom, so even crumbs will help. So I offer you just some direction. When I was a child in my yeshiva education, 2 stories captured my imagination, 2 different stories. And they seem to characterize the way Jewish community can be built. 2 stories about God. One story about God being the creator of the world and the cosmos. And in the beginning there was chaos, and out of chaos came order. The magnificent multiplicity and diversity of nature. The celebration of existence that you find in the first chapter of Genesis. Read it in one thrust. What a celebration of life, of this cosmic, magnificent God. And then from the creator God and the cosmos that mirror his reality, I was introduced to the God who's the creator of the Jewish people, who takes on the pharaohs of history and confronts absolutist pagan power and forces them to acknowledge his superiority. The great liberating story of the crossing of the sea. The sustainer God in the desert as he takes a slave people and makes them into an independent people. And then the story of failure in the books of Judges and Kings. And then the final vision of Jeremiah and Isaiah and Ezekiel, where God says, irrespective of what you do, I will change history. You are my witnesses. Shmi Mechulal Bagoyim, my name is desecrated in the world because Israel is in exile and Israel is a suffering people. I need to redeem you in order to redeem my own dignity, because my dignity is tied up with who you are. Wow, what a feeling of being Jewish, being member of a community who in a sense mediates God's larger vision for history. God is desecrated by me. He needs me to be redeemed in order for him to be redeemed in history. Moses knew that as well. When Moses tells God, when God finally lost his temper at the Jewish people and wanted to do a Noah job all over again, Moses says, sorry God, Time magazine covered the story, and you have to now recognize that you can't in any way do to the Jewish people what you did in the generation of the flood. What will the nations of the world say? What that story told me was that in some way God is limited by me. Not by Duvi Hartman, but by the Jewish people. That my people's history is in some way of such ultimate significance. And the image of my God is a cosmic liberator and redeemer of history. To be a Jew was to be part of this great drama of Jewish history and these great events. That was one story. The other story was in the beginning, God said, let us make man. Naaseh Adam. And Rashi immediately brings the Midrash which says, why does it say in the plural, let us make man? To teach us manners. That no matter how big you are, and no matter how important you are, you should always ask advice from other people. So God said, angels, do you think I should make man or don't make man? And the Midrash begins to tell stories. Some angel says you should because he's going to be nice. Some angels say don't, he's going to just lie. And you have a story of God asking advice. And then there's another Midrash that God is waiting outside of the Garden of Eden. And he doesn't go in immediately, to teach you that you shouldn't go visit your neighbor unprepared. Stay outside, knock on the door, and when they tell you come in, you should come in. And then the story of God visiting Abraham when he's sick. And then the story of God providing clothes for Adam and Eve to clothe the naked. And then the Midrash, instead of telling you about the splitting of the sea, says that to bring about marriage and love and companionship in people for God is as difficult as the splitting of the sea. To bring about love, to bring about the hungry to be fed. Suddenly I had a different image of God. Not the God who's the creator, the great dramatic figure, where being part of the Jewish people was being part of this great drama of liberation. But to be part of the Jewish people was to be given a God who taught me to ask advice from people who are my inferiors, so-called. Never to be embarrassed to say I don't know. Never to overwhelm people, to join and care about clothing the naked. Is this the story of redemption? What is God, a model of hospitality and manners? To teach me that what? That I'm supposed to care about someone who's hungry and worry about the homeless? To provide some clothes for people who haven't some clothes to wear? What does that have to do with the great events of redemption? These two stories, a story about God and the privilege of being part of this history of redemption, and a story about God that taught me to be a mensch and to say hello to my grocery man when I walk and to pick up a banana peel when I walk in the street and cover an uncovered pit so that the next guy shouldn't fall and hurt himself. Do I bring Mashiach in that? I don't think about Mashiach. I worry that if my grocery man hears me say hello in the morning to him, his day is a different day because he felt someone greeted him as a mensch. And I remember someone's name. What a great mitzvah that is. Because when you remember the person's name, the person believes that his own life or her life is significant enough for you to remember them as an individual person. Those momentary daily features of kindness, those momentary each day episodes of human experience was the other God I had. And in my own view, I would say biblical as opposed to rabbinic civilization. The Bible gives you history, drama. Operation Exodus, Operation Ethiopia, Operation Moses. To be connected to Israel is in some way to be connected to a new drama in history. That's a wonderful way to be connected to the Jewish people. To in some way be engaged by something larger than yourself. To feel that you're part of a history that is of ultimate significance. Yes, you build Jewish community and Jewish identity by plugging you into the biblical story of the drama of history. The Mishnah, the Talmud, doesn't give you dramatic stories. It asks, the first Mishnah on prayer starts, when do you recite the Shema at the nighttime? Some say from sunset, some say when the stars come out. And if you go to a party, since you'll have to get drunk and forget that you should say the Shema, it's important that you say the Shema before 12 o'clock. Can you read that Mishnah next to the Exodus story of the 10 plagues and crossing of the sea? Or you come across the Mishnah of two people walking in the street and they see a talus. And what do two Jews say when they meet? This one says, it's all mine, and this one says, it's all mine. What should you do? There's only one talus. Each one wants it for himself. Where is their history? Where is their events? It's only a daily ethical issue of such minutiae. What is the Talmud talking about? Give me drama, give me Marxism, give me redemption, give me nation building. What are you telling me what I'm supposed to do at what point of the day to read the Shema? The rabbis brought us into prose. The Bible gives us the delicious quality of exacting and exciting poetry. One gives you the dramatic event. One tells you, when you walk in the street, make sure that when someone pushes out his hand, never say no. Never say no. There are many Jewish leaders who will devote day and night, who worry day and night about the future of the Jewish people, who will call and cajole congressmen, senators, turn over, embarrass themselves in America because they want to keep Israel secure. There are people who are driven with the obsession of saving the Jewish people. And their connection to Jewishness and to Jewish history is nurtured by these great dramatic events. And they build their identity and their sense of Jewishness by that type of involvement. They are biblical Jews. If you meet them in their daily life and you say, how do you live Jewishly every day? What do you do in your home? What is the meaning of Jewishness, not in relationship to redemption, but in relationship to 5 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock when you sit down do you make our motzi when you eat? What is it about your daily life? And I used to say to myself, ugh. And now I say, you know what the person answers? Leave me with this type of sobriety. I'm involved in a great drama, and this is what electrifies me. I can't be moved by the everyday. The everyday, my secretary drives me crazy. I have business concerns, the market and this and real estate. Who knows what's going on every day? My kids, the Enikrach, this was. I don't want Judaism to touch my everyday. I want it to lift me out of my everyday. I want it to give me something larger that gives me a meaning that is beyond the daily routines of life. And there are others who will say, without a Jewish family, without a Shabbos, without schools, without Judaism meaning something of great importance to you in your daily life, there's no future. If there isn't Judaism's importance for you as a human being, if you do not internalize Judaism and make it something significant to you, to your wife, to your kids, to your neighbor, if your local community doesn't breathe a compelling Jewish morality, all the great events will not help. And therefore the concern is with halacha, with details, with what you do in the morning, when you walk, when you eat, when you gather in the intimacy of your family life. Who knows the secret as to how and in what way biblical drama or Talmudic prose concerned with developing a way of life? I would say, as the Talmud says, when they asked about 2 points of view, Hillel and Shammai. Hillel used to find something beautiful and enjoy it every day. Shammai, when he found something beautiful on Sunday, put it away for Shabbos. He worried for Shabbos. He really worried for Shabbos. And when he found something nicer, then he could enjoy it. Hillel said, Baruch Hashem Yom Yom, thank God for each day. When Friday comes around, I'm sure I'll find something nice for Shabbos. When Hillel went to a wedding, he would say they would dance around the brides. And Hillel would say, Kalana v'chasuda, this bride is so beautiful. Oh, chassan, because in those days they didn't have extended courtships. So you introduced the girl to the boy at the night of the wedding. And so you had to inform him that he did a good shidduch. So Hillel would say, Kala na'ah v'chasuda, how beautiful and marvelous, she's pious and wonderful. And he would extol her praise. That was Hillel. Shammai said, Kala kamo shehi, the Kala the way she is. So they asked, but what if she's never chamiskite? What if she's not? What are you going to say? And so he says, no. So you talk about the things that are nice, but you don't lie. And Shammai says to Hillel, mitzvah shekticha, you're not allowed to lie. What's this thing that you're talking about? And Hillel looks at Shammai, and Shammai's right, you're not supposed to lie. But Hillel says, but what if someone already bought something already, but you have to tell them the truth? The typical Jewish experience is after a person has bought something, you tell them, oh, you bought it there. I didn't tell you. I forgot. There was another place that you could have gotten it. Oh, it's the same way when you come back from Israel. You're very happy and enjoyable until you tell your friends where you were. That's where you were. You didn't see that. You didn't. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I mean, there seems to be a profound Jewish joy to make you believe that if you think you're happy, don't tell Jews. Now, and in a sense, so Hillel says this to Shammai, and says to Shammai, come on, it's already the night of the chasana. But Hillel says, when he dances, he also cares that the bride should be happy, but he can't lie. Hillel says, lying? I want to be a contextualist. Hillel agrees with situational ethics. And Hillel says, a lie is not a lie if this girl and this man will discover new capacities for love. So I have to know that when I speak, I do not speak in abstractions, I speak in a context. When the convert came to Hillel, and to Shammai first, and says, I want to convert, if you teach me the Torah on 1 foot, Shammai threw him out. What do you mean teach the Torah on 1 foot? Judaism is such an elaborate system of study. I spent 40 years trying to learn a little bit, and you want me to teach it to you on 1 foot? What type of chutzpah is this? There is no 1 foot, there is no one principle. It's a whole elaborate way of life. Please leave. Hillel came, and Hillel told him, what is hateful to you, do do not do to your neighbor. The rest is commentary. And when the rabbis were asked, and they finally saw two schools of thought, Hillel and Shammai. Who is right? And they went and asked the ultimate arbitrator on these conflicts. Tell us, should we follow the way of Hillel or should we follow the way of Shammai? And God, in his inimitable wisdom, answered, Eilu va'eilu, divrei Elohim chayim. These and these are the words of the living God. Eilu va'eilu, divrei Elohim chayim. Hillel reflects my wisdom, and so does Shammai. But the Talmud said, then God said, but the law should be followed according to Hillel. In our generation, I can only say, those who are moved to save the Jewish people, those whose Jewishness is anchored in Operation Exodus or Moses, those who experienced the thrill of saving 15,000 Jews in one day, those whose souls are nurtured by that large event. Eilu divrei Elohim chayim, these are the words of the living God. And those who say there will not be Jewish continuity unless there is intensification of Jewish learning, unless the Jewish family develops greater strength, unless we give the Jewish people prose, ritual, symbolisms, a rich identity, there will be no future, only living off the great events. Eilu divrei Elohim chayim. These are the words of the living God. But then the question is, who should you follow? God said Hillel. Hartman says, follow both. Thank you.
Δεν ενδιαφέρει πάντα. Και όλα ανταλλακτικά. Το δεξί του πόδι. Τι να κάνω, δεν ξέρω. Έχουμε και έναν ωκεανό. Τι θέλεις να μου πεις? Ωραία, με το ψεύτηκα. Και λίγο, δεν μου τα πω. Δεν θα βασιλιέται. Θα δυνατή δεν πέφτει. Ναι, δεν πέφτει. Ίσως. Κι άλλο. Θα θεωρείτε επεισόδιο. Δεν την κυρία μου επεισόδιο. Τι μου πω μπορείτε. Πήρε με αυτό. Βλέπω το φίλο. Μια φορά και πολύ. Έχω τρελαστεί. Δεν έκανε το μάθο. Είναι ωραία. Έτσι κάπως κινηματογράφηση. Θα πω τον λιγάκι και λίγο είναι να τον κόψω, να περάσει. Κρατάει. Θα το συνεχίσει. Θα μου παίζει. Λίγο παρακαλώ. Να τον θα περάσει. Είναι παιδιά. Ναι, μα την πώς. Γεια σας. Είναι